I have a tip to save you money, lots of money, and it's rather obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. You do not need the latest shiny phone toy that got launched last week. You really don't. iPhone users have it good, of course. iPhones may cost more on the whole, but at least they only get refreshed once a year. Well, Android enthusiasts in 2019 at least are now being subject to smartphone launches every week. And it's not only getting wearing for bloggers like me, it's also getting expensive. Anyone caught up in buying the latest phone and selling it a month or two later in order to get the next one, and so on. Given that 99% of what you do on your smartphone is software-based, and that on the whole the software from phone to phone is the same, certainly in terms of what you add on and sign into, then why do you need to keep changing phones at all? Of course, once every couple of years, something comes along that does the thing you're most interested in better than any other phone, better than what you had before, and that's fine, splash out. But you don't need the new ABC Pro with 2GB more RAM. You don't need the DEF Max, which has a 0.2-inch larger screen. And you don't need the GHI Fusion, which has that extra camera that you know you're going to need at least once a year. And sometimes newer isn't even better in the first place. But let me go into some specific detail in my own life. This isn't perhaps the first example of manufacturers slipping backwards instead of forwards, and in this case maybe sideways would be more accurate. You'll have noticed that Samsung's flagship phones for 2019 haven't had masses of coverage here on the phone show. The smaller S10e made it to number one in my top 5 phones in Phone Show 365, but only by virtue of it being different. The reason I haven't moved heaven and hell to get the full S10 and S10 Plus in for review is that, having tried them both at length at the launch besides my existing Galaxy S9 Plus, I came away unusually with little feeling of, well, I'm using old tech now, but this is the shiny new, which is what usually happens. Now, this little rant of mine certainly isn't a review of the S10 or S10 Plus, but I would like to go over what you get for the money compared to what you get for 2018's money, with the S9 and S9 Plus now much, much cheaper. I've routinely seen the smaller S9 for sale under £500 here in the UK, for example. Why bother spending time looking at one particular smartphone in this way? Well, because the S9 Plus has been my mainstay now for a year, review device trials accepted, and I was genuinely interested in its nominal successor. And because Samsung flagships are the benchmarks that the rest of the phone industry has to match. Yes, some manufacturers like to copy Apple and the iPhone, but in the dominant, well, across the world, Android ecosystem, Samsung is the undisputed leader, especially so as its main rival, Huawei, is being bullied out of relevance by some idiots' policies in America. So, here's the interesting thing. Joe Blogg stands in front of me. He has up to £1,000 to spend on a new Samsung Galaxy S series flagship. He sees the Galaxy S9 Plus in my hand, finds out that I'm still in love with it after a year, but then he sees that the S10 Plus is a year newer, so surely newer is better, and it's still within his budget. I'll leave the 1TB S10 Plus off to one side here. And yes, newer is usually better, but not always. In this case, we have 3 massive reasons, in my view, why the older S9 Plus is the smartphone to grab. Yes, the S10 Plus has a slightly faster processor, slightly bigger battery, slightly louder speakers, and a whole extra camera on the back and on the front. I'm not dismissing it out of hand. But firstly, the S10 Plus also swaps out Mr. Reliable capacitive fingerprint scanner on the back for a serviceable but ultimately not 100% reliable ultrasonic scanner under its display. How well this works for you is up for debate. It seemed perfect for me at the S10 launch, but I've since heard it's frustrating for many real-world users. Yes, you don't have to reach around the back, but it still seems like a step backwards in terms of speed and usability. Secondly, the S10 Plus also brings an unsightly double cutout at the top of the screen. Now, this may not bother you, or once you've seen it against bright content, you may never be able to unsee it again. Again, the double cutout doesn't actually annoy me too much, but you have to acknowledge that not having any notches or cutouts on the S9 Plus is nominally better. The compromises just aren't worth an extra 0.2 inch or so of screen diagonal. They're really not. Thirdly, there's the price, of course. Now, new S9 Plus devices amazingly still seem to hover around £500 depending on where you look. in the UK, while new S10 Plus units are 650 or so, and that also surprised me. I thought that would be higher. That £150 isn't a huge deal in itself, but the kicker is when you think the S9 Plus has been around for over a year and that it's very readily available second-hand on PSC classifieds, for example, on MeWe, where you'd be looking at £350 or so for a 128GB S9 Plus. Now that's half price, and that is worth keeping in mind. Just food for thought, the S10 Plus isn't a bad flagship. It just has a few compromises to be aware of. And I'm predicting now that the S11 Plus in 2020 will have no cutouts, will have an under-display front camera and an optical in-the-screen sensor that's both lightning fast and 100% reliable. So maybe the S11 Plus is the one to save your pennies for next year. Let me know for the PSE podcast whether any of this rings true for you.